This week, I've made over $300 in my tree side hustle, all from my abundance or from plants that I've traded for. So in this episode, Grant Payne joins me and we talk about how to set up a nursery side hustle, both for trees and for other plants, including flowers. Welcome to Thrive in the Future podcast, positive solutions to help you thrive, designing your intentional life, homesteading, gardening, and rediscovering culture and tradition. Do you want nut trees? I've got chestnut, hazelnut, elderberry, comfrey, and for a limited time I have American plum, which is a bush that can be used for hedgerows, windbreaks, and wildlife. All of them adapted for the Midwest. Check them out on grownutTrees.com. Okay, welcome back to Thrive in the Future. This week, I've got Grant Payne with me. We're talking about how to start a nursery side hustle. Hey, Grant, how's it going?
Going pretty good.
What new projects do you have going on?
Right now, I just kind of winterized down. We'll probably get right into it with the nursery side hustle thing. Is your local Tractor Supplies and Lowe's usually have some things going out. So I was at Tractor Supply last weekend, and they had about 34 pots of geraniums in hanging baskets, and I got them for $1 a piece. And you look at the value of just the plugs in the tray, the plugs in the hanging baskets, the baskets themselves, and the dirt. I made it out great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to overwinter them through until next spring, and put back out, and then they flower and have new foliage, or so I can either resell them or hang them around the yard. Because if you're in a place that has really bad, like Japanese beetles, so Japanese beetles will eat geraniums and then they'll get paralyzed and they can't move for about 10 or 15 seconds.
Really?
So they just get paralyzed and they fall to the ground.
Huh. That's funny.
Yeah. So if you have your ducks, which I have come to really love ducks because they're a little dirty, a little messy, but you can use that to your benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't destroy everything like chickens do.
Right.
So I've had a problem with a bunch of, roosters I've had free ranging that are fixing to go to freezer camp this weekend because I've just freshly mulched like 80 raised beds and they're getting in and they're tearing them up. And I'm like, I get it. You're digging for worms. It's great, but you're going to get eaten now. So yeah.
They're graduating to freezer camp.
Yes, sir.
That's funny. So how do you trim back? Do you trim back the geraniums? Do you do anything and just like cut them down to,
Nope.
like stumps or something? Or what do you do?
No, I'll leave them. They're pretty much bare stems. They're each about like six inches long. Once they get in warm weather, they'll start to put leaves back out. They'll start to continue to grow back out. So over the winter, they'll still develop their vegetation. I gave them some Osmocote, which is a slow release fertilizer. You really can't. That's one thing when you kind of have to juggle that commercial fertilization versus your natural fertilization. When you're in the nursery business, you have to use like slow release fertilizers or chemical fertilizers in some way because it's just not possible because they do not have enough room to get the nutrients they need from that small pot or that hanging basket.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's really nice to have all those, but to have pristine soil and all this other stuff, but you won't get that much growth. So
yeah. If you could have just good natural soil, it'll do you if you're doing like trees, that'll do you good for a couple months, and then they'll start to get nutrient deficiencies, like some type of chlorosis, and they usually kind of need. They need some type of fertilization because they're not in the ground to go and find it.
So how do you get them so they're not addicted to that and then they don't do well when you transplant them in the ground?
I would say that's a good question. I don't personally think they would be. I probably don't overuse it. So with Osmocote, it is little bitty balls, and you just sprinkle it over your thing. It tells you how much to use. I probably overuse it right now, because whether they were in very poor condition because they
Sure.
just drained. And I made good dirt. It was out of compost. It was out of pine bark. It was out of perlite and peat moss. So it was a
Hmm.
very good. I make my own potting mix. It was a fantastic combination, and I can make it cheaper than what you can buy it for wholesale.
Wow.
So but it went through like 4 or 5 months, and then they kind of started. They weren't being able to grow anymore. So
Hmm.
I don't think they'll be addicted to it and be reliant on it because they're using that nutrients to continue to grow and develop roots and develop foliage. So when you put them in the ground, they'll have the opportunity to shoot out roots to go find and go get enough nutrients so they can continue to grow.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So let's talk a little bit about you creating a side hustle with a plant nursery. I'll talk about trees, and then you have everything else. So one of the keys that I found is seeds have a memory,
Yes.
and
You need to sell shirts that say seeds have a memory. I'll help you figure out what design you need and then I'll buy some. I love it.
well, you're free to create the design, and I'll pay you for it. That'd be great.
All right.
So yeah, see, so seeds have a memory. The trees and the seeds that you get, they survived and they thrived in a certain kind of climate. So I'm in Northeast Kansas, even getting Baker Creek seeds for the garden, and they're in Missouri. Then, they're in southern Missouri. Then some of their stuff just doesn't do well on my land just because it's enough different. I've got a lot of clay, all this other stuff. But the thing that'll set you apart if you're going to get into selling trees, selling plants, whatever else, is that you are selling local, that you are selling something that is adapted towards your area. So especially with chestnuts, I like to grow out chestnuts. And if I don't grow them out myself, I don't have a lot of options. I mean, I can go with Twisted Tree Farm up in, the Northeast. They're in upstate New York. That's not too bad. I have a couple of trees that are from there. Or there's the Northwest, but those don't do very well because this ain't Pacific Northwest, right? So those just die. And then there's some other nurseries up around Michigan. All of those don't do well in Kansas. And this is how I started, and I share this story quite a bit. But my friend went down to the local elementary school in our small town, and he thought that he would plant some chestnut trees. And after a few years, he could do chestnuts roasting by the open fire. He demonstrated to the kids. So that was a good idea until the principal said, no way. We can't do that from a legal liability standpoint. So the chestnuts are still down there. They're like somewhere between 7 and 10 years old. They're big. And no one's picking these chestnuts up. He showed me them and he gave me some. And then I'm pretty much the only one harvesting them. So I get buckets of them. And then I started sprouting them out in buckets of sand for the wintertime. And then in April, they've got a shoot coming out. They've got a root coming out. I take them and put them in tree pots and then grow them out the rest of the way. So I have chestnuts. I go and plant some. I sell some and I trade with others for other stuff. So, and then little by little, it's grown into a pretty good gig. I got $250 this week from the different locations, and we'll talk about options to sell them. It's hard to sell trees in the fall because nobody's really thinking about trees. If you go to Google Trends and you look up anything from chestnuts or comfrey or anything, it peaks in March to May, usually around May. That's when everybody goes to the garden centers, right? So no one's really planting too many trees in the fall. And a lot of the nurseries like Twisted Tree don't even sell trees in the fall anymore. You've got a little niche where the people who want to plant trees in the fall, you can sell to, but you have to be realistic and say, okay, so I have to put these somewhere because then we'll ramp up in the spring.
So to address that question, such an easy thing to do because if you want to get into the nursery side hustle, which I'll kind of after this get into something that I personally went through that would have expanded this into more of a side hustle. But if you're able to go out and source a bunch of pallets, go get those pallets and then take PVC pipe, run your PVC pipe overhead, get you some greenhouse plastic, and bang, you've got a hot frame that will keep all your stuff good through the winter. Now,
Oh, yeah.
you being in Kansas, which is, in my opinion, a much harsher climate when it comes to cold, you might get maybe like some black 55-gallon barrels, fill them full of water, and
Mm-hmm.
then sit them in the middle so they will absorb heat like a battery. If you're able to get like iron rock, if I don't know if that's abundant in your area, if you can get some iron rock, line the edges with iron rock, other things to help absorb heat and to keep that warmer to kind of fight off that frost would be fantastic.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So yeah, I've got a greenhouse that I've created using discarded windows,
Yeah.
and it's really good for storing those kind of things. I can get a lettuce crop that'll last almost, sometimes into January, sometimes in February, and then I can keep my chestnuts from getting too cold. Most of the time, I just put them in the garage, so they've got enough of those 3 months of cold in the garage but they're not freezing, and then that seems to work pretty good. I just stack up 2-gallon buckets, not the 5-gallon buckets. I take 2-gallon buckets, I fill them with sand, I put one layer of chestnuts in there, put a lid on them with a hole drilled in it, and I just stack them up in the garage. And then in April, I go check them. So yeah.
That's one thing I kind of want to do with hickory nuts because I just got a
Oh
five
yeah.
gallon bucket full of hickory nuts and black walnuts as well.
Yeah.
That and we still have that chestnut tree at school. I'm actually going to go tomorrow morning and pick up what's fallen off that. Try to crack them open. I kind of struggle with kind of cracking them open because they're so spiky.
Uh-huh.
So
Well, the best way to do that is either use gloves or put them on the ground and step on them.
okay, yeah.
So if you step on them, then, it'll bust the things open. We're
Now,
at the sort of time, like we just got done with our harvest. So the last ones opened up on the trees and dumped all over the ground. So there's some burrs on the ground, but for the most part, the ones that were on the ground got eaten by the squirrels or picked up by me. And then the rest of them just got dumped. The burr opened on the tree.
yeah.
There's empty burrs on the tree, and then they all dumped on the ground.
One thing I've been thinking about that I wanted to ask you is you had mentioned when we talked about chestnuts before, is there's up in Germany they'll have these chestnut orchards they'll run hogs through. Do
Oh,
the
yeah.
hogs not have an issue with like getting them out of the shell, or do they just kind of plow it straight through?
They apparently figure it out. So it's either I don't know the specifics of what they do, but
Mm-hmm.
apparently they have enough that dump down.
Mm-hmm.
And so in France and Italy and up in all those areas, they've got hazelnuts and they've got chestnuts. They run the hogs through there, and it's supposed to get a rich meat. It's very distinctive for that
Yeah.
area. And, kind of a brownish kind of meat, but it's got that kind of rich flavor to it.
Yeah. One thing we always kind of talk about is abundance, is when you have abundance, use it properly. And if you really want to kind of get into nursery production and get abundance, don't forget your don't forget acorn trees.
Yeah.
You can always use those, sell them to people who want deer plots or food plots or even just to have trees. But things I have found that are very easy to propagate are pomegranate trees. If you can get a hold of one in your area, just get some cuttings so you can have it in your area, grow it out. I had a 9-foot tall pomegranate tree that would produce 2 or 3 dozen pomegranates a year until it had a really late cold snap, killed it down to the stump.
Wow.
But which it had some disease already, so it was already weak. But figs are so prolific. I still have everything kind of in draft of what you wanted me to write. But when you can lay root, figs, you can lay root pomegranates, you can just about lay root any and every tree. And that's a process when you take like a low limb, touch it to the soil, bound up soil around it, and then put a board and then some heavy rocks or bricks on top of it. You can do the same thing with like an air layer by putting, a clip of soil around the branch of the tree. If you kind of scratch off the bark, so you can say like the green cambium layer, and then put some rooting powder on it and then close that up to keep it moist. And then you can also do an air root through that.
Sure. Yeah. And also folks do stool beds. So they'll plant an apple tree seedling and then kind of bend it over and then pile dirt up on it. And the branches from the side of the apple tree are now going up. And so those will grow up, they'll root out into the dirt, and then you can go and cut, and you'll get like 4 apple seedlings out of
Yeah,
that apple tree.
that's
And
essentially the lay rooting process.
okay, yeah. See, I have an autumn olive in my food forest that for some reason blew over a little bit. It's doing that. I don't have it completely covered in soil, but the side branches are coming up and turning into, seedlings by themselves. The good thing about doing that with apples is that you don't have to worry about grafting because you've already grafted the apple, or the apple's already grafted. You lay it down and you get it like that. You could get a couple of seedlings out of that. They're going to be true to the
Yeah,
apple because
yeah,
they're above the graft.
yeah. That's cool. That's always cool because I had crab apples, like the ornamental crab apples that will, flower and make like the little bitty teeny tiny berry sized apples.
Sure.
In my opinion, that is what is a true crab apple. I
Hmm.
know you might see some old timers call like these misshapen green apples crab apples. Um, Not the same thing, but those are also good used for rootstock. So if you have one that's good in your area, you could always just take one of those, get them on clearance. If you can see, the funny thing is when they have rootstock, they'll put suckers up. A lot of the time they use, in my opinion, low quality rootstock, and they'll start shooting suckers up that are not true to the fruit you're growing. So you could
Right.
always take those, cut those and root those, lay root those, and then you could always create more rootstock to graft another apple seed to. And like persimmons are another good fruit tree that I think a lot of people sleep on. But you can graft a peach tree onto a persimmon tree. So if
Really?
you grow up a bunch of persimmon saplings, you can then graft peach onto your persimmon.
Yeah. Persimmons grow like crazy around here. They don't, they're not that great to eat until they're really, really super duper ripe
Yeah,
to
you
the
have
point
to
where they're almost
essentially
nasty.
you have to essentially kind of wait till they're mushy, and then you
Right.
you process them, and then you cook them down.
Hmm. And they're still kind of, you know, uh, sour or stringent, because they're wild, or they're Kansas persimmons, right? So yeah, I haven't heard about grafting peach onto them. That's pretty neat.
Yeah. Um, there's all kinds of things. One thing is a nursery side hustle. Facebook, get on like Nextdoor or Neighbors. I forget what the name of the app's called. Hold on, Nextdoor. Find people who are getting rid of flowers they don't want anymore. Just come dig them up, take them home, divide them out, and then repot them, nurse them, and then sell. You can do that with daylilies, canna lilies, calla lilies, hostas, pretty much anything like that. They're all very low maintenance, and they'll
Hmm.
essentially do all of the work.
Yeah, you had a mum factory going on over there.
Yeah, we
So those
did.
are chrysanthemums, right?
Chrysanthemums, yes, those are your
Hmm.
standard mums that um, I plan on next year growing them out personally myself, but these were grown out at school. Um, so if you want to turn this into a legitimate business, I encourage everybody find a wholesale like a wholesale who sells like plant cuttings. You can buy them in trays of 288 for about $40 to $50.
Really?
And you sometimes you can, if you have a greenhouse, sometimes you can catch things on clearance. That instead of their 50 cents, they may be 12 cents a cutting. So your price drops significantly. I know North Carolina wholesale plugs is what I check out. That's where I'm going to order from. I can't say anything about their business, but they look like they know what they're doing. Um, so I will wholesale buy plants from the school, which is we're in the horticulture program. I did the same thing last spring. I pretty much filled a bunch of orders, and then I paid for them wholesale, and then turned around and flipped them, made about 60-70% off of those.
Right.
You can do the same. Take them to farmers markets, flea markets, stuff like that. If you always have extra and you really just kind of want to start getting your name out there,
Hmm.
there are tons of things that you can do. Like your begonias. Those are good. Pretty much any bedding plant in the that you would have in springtime, like vinca, all does great. My favorite is celosia, like the fire combs. That's my personal favorite. I had some this year, and I ended up doing the math on it, and I have a little mason jar with about 30,000 seeds from a handful of plants.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's crazy good. Yeah. So some people say, well, what about the state forestry service? So here in Kansas and in Missouri, you can get 25 plants for $75, which is $3 a plant, right? And they're only in the little small tree pot. But at the same time, you're supposed to not resell those. So what I no, so what I do is because that's you basically sort of agree that you're not going to resell those, but I take those home and I grow them out for a year
Yeah.
and I adapt them to my land, and then
Yeah.
they're not the state's plant anymore. They're
All
my
right.
plant.
Yeah, I like that because you're also putting in the time and the energy to repot them, keep
Right.
them through the winter, fertilize them as needed, protect
Hmm.
them. Yeah, I love it. I love that. I
Yeah, at
think
least a
I'm,
year because then it's like, look, dude, it's over a year since I bought these. These are mine now.
and what you can also do is you can also take cuttings off those trees, root them, grow
Hmm.
your own. I think I may see if it's too late for me to buy some of those tree. I don't know where I would find that to buy some, but I think I might just do that
Yeah,
to
we've
this
got in
year.
Kansas, they come up. There was a sale starting in September, and then they have the spring sale starts December 1st. So, and I just grow them out for a year. And then, in addition to, and this year I got my first hazelnuts. My first, 7 years ago, I planted hazelnuts from the Michigan nursery, and I was just about to give up on them. I have 6 plants back there in the back 40. And I went back there and there was a handful of hazelnuts on each plant. So now I've got some hazel from those. So I'm gonna plant those out or sprout those out and get some seedlings next year.
So I just pulled up the Georgia Forestry Commission seedlings, and
Mm-hmm.
they have um, elite genetics for like loblolly pines. They have like 4 different loblolly pines. They're selling them for 60 cents a piece if you buy 50 of them. They have persimmons at $3 a piece if you buy 10, 50 if you buy them at $1. I may just do that. And then they have like flowering trees like crepe myrtle, redbud, dogwoods.
Yep.
And then they have some hardwood trees. So that is very cool. They even have nut trees, but they're out. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is that
Usually
is
the
something I didn't think about.
nut trees usually become available, in like here, they become available. They sell those or that you can order them in December and then they'll ship in the late winter.
Hmm.
So I got a bunch of hazelnut last year and some persimmons and things like that. But and this is another thing is make the relationships. So I've got a good relationship with apple orchard guy down here that who's 39th Parallel Nursery. He's at 39thparallel.com. I don't compete with him because he does everything so cool that I get scions from him. I've got trees that I have apples bearing. I've been buying trees from him every year since I think it's 2017. So, I've got 6-year-old, 7-year-old trees that I bought with him from every year. And then every winter I buy scions and rootstock from him. And then I try and another round of grafting. So I don't mess with apple trees because he does it so well.
Hmm.
But by nurturing that relationship, I called him up and I said, "Hey, I'm looking at the chestnut. There's a chestnut business down the street from me, and they're a huge chestnut business. They're organic, and they did a warning that this year there was a late frost, and he's down in the valley a little bit, but there was a late frost that affected him, and he can't meet his orders for the local stores, and he's organic, but and we'll get into whether you can use those from the store, but so he had a late frost. He's got very little to no crop. I'm driving past the apple guy who's, half mile away from there, and he doesn't have hardly any apples on his trees. And I was really surprised. So I call him up. I said, "Hey, Mike, it looks like you don't have any apples today. What happened? And he said he got hit by that frost too. But since I have a relationship with the guy and I buy from him all the time, he said, hey, I've got some American plum that I have, and they're extras, and you can have them for free. Just come pick them up. I'll go, okay, So, and American plums like a thorny bush that you use for hedgerows and and wildlife and stuff. So I'm afraid that's going to take over here. So I'm going to trade them with some other people, and then you can diversify by trading amongst yourselves. So this is basically a master class that you could take and run with. I'll also have links in the show notes on how I sprout out chestnuts and other seeds. If you like this unique topic, shoot us a tip on Venmo at Thriving the Future or Cash App $Thriving the Future. Join our Thriving Patreon at patreon.com/Thriving the Future. That helps us cover our expenses like hosting. Come back next week for part 2 on how to start a nursery side hustle. If you can't wait that long, join the Patreon at patreon.com/Thriving the Future, and you can get the part 2 of this episode sooner than next week. Thank you for listening to Thriving the Future podcast. If you like what you hear, please click that like or subscribe button in your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter at Thriving the Fute, and also go to thrivingthefuture.com.